You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Athan Hristodulu.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Athan Hristodulu. It's February 15th, 2022, and today we are doing another divisional power rankings video, and today we discuss the NFC West. I felt it fitting to set up this series so that as the Super Bowl wraps up, we can kind of work through the beginning of the NFC. Then when the Super Bowl's over, we finish with the NFC West being one of the teams in the Super Bowl, and then we can start off the AFC with the AFC North next up as we roll into the AFC side of things. So make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and let's talk some NFC West power rankings. Who's sitting at the top of the division? Who's sitting at the bottom? I probably have some big surprises for you guys, but I have some pretty good reasoning for why the teams are where they are. So let's jump into the discussion. We are going to go from 4 to 1 for this power rankings here, starting off with the number 4 team, and it is going to be a playoff team, and I'm sure this is going to get a reaction, but playoff team, Arizona Cardinals, 11-6 this past season, but I have some concerns rolling into this offseason for this team. My first big thing is really just a question for the team, and it's basically just kind of what happened in that back half of the year. The Cardinals looked so good, and they were so strong heading into the first half, like through the first half of the season. I believe the Cardinals started out, it was either 7-0 or 8-0 before they finished the year off 11-6. Does not really make sense how things just kind of fell apart the way that they did. I understand there were injuries dealt to them throughout the entirety of the year, as is with every team in the NFL, but it felt like almost like losing DeAndre Hopkins was a death sentence for this team. And then when they got Chase Edmonds back from when James Conner did an excellent job spelling for him that time period that he was away. They got Chase Edmonds back, and it seemed like the running game almost took a step back. Like they should have just kept rolling with the hot hand and James Conner. I don't really know. But yeah, you lose DeAndre Hopkins, but then you get back your number one running back, and somehow the team just kept, fumbling away losses against teams that they probably shouldn't have been losing to. That backup Colts squad that was decimated by COVID was able to beat them in that game late in the season. Just a lot of big questions for this team. And then now we're looking at some potential drama with Kyler Murray and the Cardinals. And I know he just released a statement saying that, this isn't who he is and this is not what he's about and he's going to get better and yada, yada, yada. But he didn't really mention anything about the Cardinals in specific in that conversation. So are we rolling into an offseason of drama where maybe Kyler Murray's going to try to throw some weight around and get pushed and, push his way out of there? Maybe, but it doesn't make sense to me why that would be going on. I feel like the Cardinals and him are a really good fit together. He's got Cliff Kingsbury there. Overall, there's just so many questions coming up after what was a really good season overall that kind of ended in disaster with the playoff game against the Rams. Not sure what's going on, but beyond just the drama, the questions and things like that, the concerns that I have for the team, they're going to be dealing with some big-ticket free agents this coming offseason here. Christian Kirk's going there up on the market, A.J. Green, Chandler Jones, Zach Ertz, who they just traded for, left guard Max Garcia, then, of course, James Conner and Chase Edmonds, as we just mentioned. A handful of guys that are number ones for the team or number twos for the team where money is going to have to be dealt out, and they're sitting about $1 million or so. I believe it's like $800K roughly over the cap right now. So they're going to have to move some money around, make some room to even bring back some of these guys. You just dealt out a pretty big deal for, oh my goodness, I'm forgetting his name right now. You just dished out a really big 3-year deal to J.J. Watt, this past offseason, and now you're strapped with money. He didn't even play the whole year. The season, again, kind of went down in flames there in the back half of the year and into the playoffs. There's going to be some tough decisions to be made this offseason, in my opinion, for the Cardinals, and I feel like I'm just coming away with more questions than answers. Certainly they can bounce back, and maybe all of this is a non-factor, and they come back next year with as good or maybe a better record. Definitely possible, but right now there's a few more negative things kind of spinning around Arizona than I do think I see positive things. So I like them at number 4. Could they be a little bit higher? Potentially, but the reason I have them at number 4 is because the team that I have sitting at number 3, they missed the playoffs. They were 7-10. The Seattle Seahawks have there's a path to going back to success in being a contender in the league, and it starts with one, Russell Wilson wanting to still be there from what it sounds like. There is the conversation that he's willing to explore his options, though, and he wants to see what's going on around the league and where the interests may lie in him as a quarterback and going elsewhere, which makes sense. I think at this point in his career, seeing, you have like the likes of Peyton Manning, who left the Colts and went to the Broncos. You have Tom Brady, who went to the Buccaneers. You have Matthew Stafford now, who went to the Rams. 3 quarterbacks who left their former teams and went on and won another Super Bowl with another team. So there's a lot to be said about that. But ultimately, and I've said this for a while now, I really think that when everything settles and the offseason is wrapping up, I think that Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson in Seattle for at least one more season is probably the best route that this team can go. But there is going to need to be work that you can't really ignore, that has to be done. Offensive line obviously needs an upgrade. Defense needs an upgrade as well. Pass rush is definitely a concern for me. And in the secondary as well, the Jamal Adams fiasco has been something that's been under a microscope for a while now. And while I think he's a great player, I don't think Seattle really utilizes him correctly. And I dove into that. If you haven't watched my State of the Seahawks video, that's a video you should definitely take the time to check out, because I go into a lot of this in detail and really focus in on the Seahawks as a whole. But overall, a lot of work that needs to be done for both the defense and the offensive line. Defensive backs, pass rush, they were 23rd in sacks this year. I believe they only had 34 on the season, if I'm remembering correctly. And then when you look at the free agent list that they have, it's not too extensive, but there are going to be some guys that are going to have their contracts expired. And I'm expecting some of these guys to potentially just be allowed to walk. And coupled with that, they have a fair amount of money in cap space. You're looking at $36.6 million under the cap for the Seahawks here. So things bode well for them overall. But, I mean, you are potentially going to be losing Dwayne Brown, Quandre Diggs, DJ Reed, Rasheem Green, Gerald Everett, Sidney Jones, center Ethan Pocic. There's a lot of people, with bigger names going up for free agency here. Some of these guys I do expect to walk regardless, but overall, you have a ton of money, a quarterback, and a head coach that it seems like their relationship is better than what the media will have you believe. And I think ultimately, Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll stay for at least one more year. I think that, one bad year can't negate the success you guys have had throughout the entirety of your career together. So I think at least one more year to see if they can get it done is definitely on the table, and probably more likely than not, in my opinion. Couple that with the fact that there's a lot of money for this team to play around with. You're not really losing a ton of big name starters from your team. There are some guys that you'll be able to re-sign with all that extra money you have, and still have money left over to bring in a guy or two through free agency. And then, of course, with the draft as well. There's a lot to look forward to for Seattle, and I really like their shot going into next season. Coming in at the number 2 spot for the NFC West, and this probably comes as no surprise, the 10-7 San Francisco 49ers. I'm excited to see how they fare going into next season and what they do this offseason. There's a lot to be excited about. Obviously, the development of Trey Lance and finding out where he is after having an entire year to be the backup. He did get some game action throughout the season. And then, of course, what happens with Jimmy Garoppolo and where they opt to move him to. From what I'm gathering and from what I've been reading and just kind of reading the room of the NFL, it really seems like there's a strong possibility that despite the 49ers probably waiting too long to trade Jimmy G, and they still made it to the NFC Championship, so you can argue that they probably didn't wait too long either. They still might end up getting a first round or like a high second round draft pick for Jimmy Garoppolo. That's probably one of the bigger stories that'll be going through this offseason. The draft class for the quarterbacks in this year's group is not as strong as it has been in years past, and I've seen a lot of people say, and I haven't done my homework on this, so this isn't me talking, this is me, repeating what I'm seeing here. There seems to be concern with just how ready a lot of the quarterbacks are in this year's draft, and you couple that with a quarterback free agent market and potential trade market as well that is very up in the air and nobody really knows what's going on. it would be smart for San Francisco to move sooner rather than later and deal Jimmy Garoppolo, and I would not be surprised if something comes up sooner than later, especially before free agency. If they can get Garoppolo moved before free agency kicks off, that's probably the most ideal time for them to do so because he has the most value. And while I haven't been his biggest supporter this year, and I have definitely put him under a microscope myself personally, he is better than a lot of the quarterbacks that started this past season, and I think he has a really good shot to start elsewhere, and he's an upgrade for at least like 12 to 18 teams in the league, in my opinion, somewhere around there. I don't know where exactly, but somewhere around that range. He's definitely better than a lot of the quarterbacks that started this season for a handful of the really poor teams. So with that in mind, you have obviously the potential of bringing in some draft capital. You have the first round, third overall pick, Trey Lance, who's going to be getting his shot next season from the way things sound. And their real focus going through this offseason, the defense was excellent. Could you work on maybe bringing in another guy for the secondary? Sure. And in my opinion, adding another offensive weapon, like a true, legitimate offensive weapon to this team to pair alongside Deebo Samuel will only help them. They have a phenomenal offensive line. And realistically speaking, they do have some contracts coming up in free agency. Laken Tomlinson, Daniel Brunskill, a couple of guys there. Arden Key, he had 6.5 sacks, I believe, this year. Cornerback Kawan Williams, Jakisi Tart, who dropped that really big interception or potential interception in that championship game. And then interior defensive lineman DJ Jones. So there are some guys that they're going to need to figure out what to do contract-wise with. But overall, this is a team that has so much talent and it is ready to really continue to push through the playoff potential that they have. They're only $4.5 million over in the cap space. They are going to have to figure out what they do with the money there, but overall, there's just a lot to like about this team and a lot of potential with the future. And when Jimmy Garoppolo gets moved, I think that ultimately they're going to have plenty of money and capital to really play around with and see what they can put together for the 2022 season, and I'm excited about what they end up doing. Then coming in at the number 1 spot, obviously the last team of the division we haven't talked about here, the 12-5 reigning, defending Super Bowl champions, the LA Rams. There are a few question marks now that I think the Super Bowl added to kind of wrinkle out what the Rams do in the offseason here. It definitely changed up what I was doing for this video. First off, what happens with Odell Beckham now? He tore his ACL, and from what everything sounded like going into the Super Bowl game, it sounds like the Rams want Odell back. It sounds like Odell wants to be in LA. With the tearing of his ACL, same knee again, so same side and everything. So now there's an injury history there of a couple of ACL tears. There's definitely going to be a bit of concern, in my opinion, with that, whether it's just the durability of the knee or, is he injury prone? I don't like that word because I feel like it's sometimes more just bad luck than anything else, but non-contact injury, ACL tear, that's always really tough to deal with. And then also the question of Robert Woods and what they're going to do there. You have two essentially like 1Bs to Cooper Kupp's 1As at wide receiver now, both coming off of injury. Obviously, Odell's going to be further behind in the rehab process than Woods. Do they opt to just keep Woods and let Odell walk? Do they try to bring all three back and just keep Odell and Woods on like 1-year prove-it deals to see how they fare coming back post-injury? That's going to be a question that I think a lot of us are going to have to keep an eye on, and something that is very intriguing for this team, because I think Odell Beckham was a huge proponent and huge reason as to why they made it out Super Bowl champions at the end of this season. Obviously, with the touchdown catch in the game, he had 2 catches for like 50-something yards and the touchdown catch. I mean, if he didn't go down with injury, in my opinion, that Super Bowl game probably doesn't end up being as close as it was, because once he gets hurt, the defense was able to focus more on Cooper Kupp for the Bengals, and it really kind of slowed down the Rams offense, which jumped out to a pretty aggressive start out of the gate when Beckham was still in the game. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do at the wide receiver position. I expect them to want to try to bring Von Miller back as well. You don't trade for somebody like Von Miller and then just let him walk after winning a Super Bowl championship. And there will be questions surrounding Aaron Donald and whether he decides to retire or not. And the depth in the secondary obviously needs to be addressed. We can't be going and calling Eric Weddle again come playoffs to, fill in a hole. I don't think that's very likely. He tore his pec in the Super Bowl. He got his ring that he wanted. I think he's probably done for good this time, so I don't think he would take that call the next time around. Maybe he would. I don't know. The competitor in him might want to keep him, maybe might keep the door slightly cracked open. The biggest issue, though, for this team is going to be the cap space, though. $13.6 million over the cap. They're going to have to move some major money around. It sounds like Matthew Stafford's going to get a deal that's restructured, and when that comes through, that's going to drastically lower his cap hit. I'm assuming by a significant amount, because I think he's playing on like the 5th year of the deal that he was with the Lions when they traded him over. Maybe it's the 6th year at this point. I don't know. He was on a 5 or 6 year deal when he got moved over, so they took a big cap hit for that. And I think with the restructuring of the deal, restructuring some other guys as well, moving some money around, they do have, as mentioned, Beckham and Miller as free agents. Darius Williams is a guy that's going to have to be looked at. Austin Corbett, Brian Allen, Sonny Michel, Matt Gay, Troy Reeder, and Matt Gay's on there because he's gonna take a lump sum of money there. He's been a great kicker for the Rams. Definitely some players they need to fill some holes with, and some guys they need to try to keep around. We'll have to see what they end up doing there, but I like the Rams' chances at running it back. We've seen the last couple of Super Bowl winning teams doing a really good job of keeping their teams intact and together. Whether the Rams can pull off the repeat that the last 2 Super Bowl champions tried to gun for themselves will remain to be seen until next year, but I do like the core of this Rams team. They have a lot of really good talent, and when healthy, on paper, this is probably the best team in the league right now. Obviously, free agency, the draft will alter that a bit, but at this very moment, Rams sit at the top. I like them at number 1. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. This is my NFC West Power Rankings. AFC starts next, and we'll be starting with the AFC North, so keep your eyes out for that. And I will see you guys next time. Have a good one.